I had just returned from my lunch meeting when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Two federal agents in dark suits were standing in my private office, methodically going through my confidential files. Both wore official ID badges and latex gloves, treating my workspace like a crime scene. One was photographing documents while the other examined my computer with surgical precision. My heart didn't race, it simply sank into my stomach as the reality hit me. My name is Kane Darkwater. I'm 39 years old and I own Shadowmere Enterprises, a commercial property investment firm based in Chicago's Blackstone district. What started as a routine whistleblower investigation turned into something that would expose the biggest betrayal of my professional career. Not because I was guilty of the allegations, but because the evidence they found revealed who had been systematically stealing from me. I walked closer, setting down my coffee cup on the reception desk, trying to maintain composure while my mind raced through possibilities. The taller agent straightened, showing his credentials. Agent Storm Nightbane from the Federal Trade Commission introduced himself and his partner, Agent Raven Goldthorn. They were investigating a whistleblower complaint filed against Shadowmere Enterprises for alleged securities fraud, client fund misappropriation, and falsified investment returns. I knew immediately who had filed the complaint. Viper Shadowcrest, my business partner for the past 6 years, had been increasingly hostile about my management decisions. 3 months earlier, he'd demanded a larger share of company profits, claiming his contributions were undervalued. I told them to check everything, that I had nothing to hide. Agent Nightbane seemed surprised by my cooperative attitude, noting that most people in my situation would be demanding to see warrants or calling lawyers. My response was simple: innocent people don't obstruct investigations. What I didn't tell the agents was that I'd been conducting my own investigation into irregularities in our client accounts. For the past 2 months, I'd noticed small discrepancies in investment reports, client payments that didn't match our internal records, and suspicious transfers that I couldn't trace. I'd hired Phoenix Starlight from Starlight Investigation Services to help me understand what was happening to our financial systems. Over the next 4 hours, Agents Nightbane and Goldthorn systematically examined every aspect of Shadowmere Enterprises' operations. They interviewed employees, reviewed client files, and analyzed our investment tracking software. Their faces began changing around hour 3. The confident expressions of investigators closing in on fraud suspects shifted to confusion, then concern, then something approaching alarm. Agent Nightbane approached my desk with troubling news. The allegations in the whistleblower complaint didn't match the evidence in their files. According to their analysis, my investment returns were accurately reported, client funds were properly segregated, and there was no indication of securities fraud. But they'd found something else entirely. Agent Goldthorn revealed evidence of systematic embezzlement that the whistleblower complaint hadn't mentioned. Someone had been skimming client payments and manipulating account records to hide the theft. Preliminary analysis suggested approximately $340,000 over 18 months. Based on the digital signatures and access logs, only 2 people in the company had the necessary permissions: me and Viper Shadowcrest. The pieces were falling into place. Viper hadn't filed a whistleblower complaint to expose fraud. He'd filed it to preemptively discredit me before I discovered his embezzlement scheme. I showed them the encrypted drive that Phoenix had prepared, containing her preliminary findings about the financial irregularities I'd been investigating for 2 months. The agents reviewed Phoenix's documentation with growing alarm, realizing that my business partner had been systematically stealing from client accounts while preparing to frame me through the whistleblower complaint. Subscribe to see what happened when they confronted Viper. The confrontation came the next morning. Agents Nightbane and Goldthorn had spent the night analyzing Phoenix's evidence alongside their own findings. The case against Viper was overwhelming. I arrived at the office early to find Viper already at his desk, apparently working normally. He looked up with the same fake smile he'd been using since our partnership began souring, asking about the excitement with federal agents the day before. I told him they were still asking questions about 340 years in missing client funds. His expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated calculation rather than surprise. That's when Agents Nightbane and Goldthorn entered with 2 additional federal agents I hadn't met. They arrested Viper for wire fraud, embezzlement, and filing false statements with federal investigators. I watched as the man who'd been systematically destroying my business was handcuffed and read his rights. His confident facade finally cracked, replaced by panic and desperate attempts to negotiate. He looked at me pleadingly, claiming this was just a business dispute between partners. After Viper was taken into custody, Agent Goldthorn explained the full scope of his scheme. Your partner had been skimming client payments for over a year, then covering the thefts by manipulating investment reports to show false gains that offset the stolen funds. When clients requested withdrawals that he couldn't cover, he filed the whistleblower complaint to trigger a federal investigation that would freeze your assets and give him time to either replace the money or blame you for the missing funds. The audacity was staggering. Viper had turned federal law enforcement into an unwitting tool for covering his crimes. What happens to Shadowmere Enterprises now? Based on our investigation, your company is the victim of embezzlement, not the perpetrator of securities fraud. The clients who lost money will be able to pursue recovery through your insurance and through prosecution of your former partner. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Blade Ironforge's office at Ironforge Legal Solutions, reviewing the legal implications of Viper's arrest. Kane, the federal case is solid, Blade explained. Viper's facing 15 to 20 years on the fraud charges alone. The false whistleblower complaint adds additional penalties for obstruction of justice. What about the clients who lost money? Your business insurance will cover most of the losses and the court will order restitution from Viper's assets. More importantly, the investigation cleared Shadowmere Enterprises of any wrongdoing. Have you heard anything about his legal strategy? Blade smiled grimly. His attorney is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence is too overwhelming. Viper documented his own crimes through the computer access logs. The irony wasn't lost on me. Viper's attempt to frame me for embezzlement had led federal investigators directly to evidence of his actual embezzlement. 6 months after the audit, I was testifying before a federal grand jury about the impact of Viper's crimes on Shadowmere Enterprises and our clients. Mr. Darkwater, the prosecutor asked, did you have any suspicion that your business partner was stealing from client accounts? I suspected financial irregularities but didn't realize the extent of the theft until the federal investigation uncovered the evidence. What made you cooperate so fully with the investigation? Innocent people don't obstruct investigations. I wanted federal agents to find the truth, regardless of what that truth revealed. Even if it meant exposing problems in your own company, especially if it meant exposing problems, my clients deserved to know what happened to their money. Viper ultimately pleaded guilty to 12 federal charges and received an 18-year prison sentence. The judge specifically noted that his attempt to manipulate federal investigators through false accusations had demonstrated a complete lack of remorse or respect for the legal system. The civil recovery process took another year, but we were able to restore 94% of the stolen funds to affected clients through insurance claims and asset seizure from Viper's hidden accounts. Most satisfying was rebuilding Shadowmere Enterprises' reputation. The federal investigation had actually enhanced our credibility with potential clients, who appreciated working with a firm that had been thoroughly vetted by federal auditors. Frost Moonwhisper, my younger brother who worked in corporate communications, helped me understand the broader implications of what had happened. Kane, you realized that Viper's whistleblower complaint was the best thing that could have happened to your business. How so? Without the federal investigation, you might never have discovered the embezzlement until the losses became catastrophic. Viper's attempt to frame you actually saved Shadowmere Enterprises. He was right. If Viper had continued stealing without the federal audit exposing his scheme, the eventual discovery would have been far more damaging to both our clients and our company's survival. 1 year after the audit, I received an unexpected call from Agent Nightbane. "Kane, we've arrested 3 other individuals who were part of Viper's embezzlement network. Apparently, your former partner was sharing stolen funds with associates who helped him manipulate financial records." "How did you find them?" "Digital forensics analysis of his computer revealed encrypted communications with co-conspirators. The investigation is expanding into a multi-state fraud case." "Any other businesses affected?" "At least 4 that we've identified so far. Viper's scheme was more sophisticated and widespread than we initially realized." The revelation that I'd been targeted by an organized fraud ring, rather than just betrayed by a dishonest partner, actually provided some perspective about the situation. This wasn't personal betrayal so much as professional criminal activity. 2 years later, I was speaking at a financial industry conference about recognizing and preventing internal fraud when someone asked about trusting business partners. "The key is remembering that trust should be based on verification, not faith," I explained. "Regular audits, segregated access controls, and independent oversight aren't signs of distrust. They're signs of professional responsibility." "What about the emotional impact of discovering a partner's betrayal?" I thought about Viper's fake smile, his calculated attempts to increase his profit share while stealing from our clients, his willingness to destroy my reputation to cover his crimes. The hardest part wasn't discovering the betrayal. The hardest part was realizing I'd ignored warning signs because I wanted to believe in the partnership. What were those warning signs? Increased secrecy about financial processes, resistance to routine audits, and most tellingly, attempts to blame external factors for internal problems. When someone starts suggesting that transparency is the enemy of efficiency, that's when you need to investigate. After the conference, a young business owner approached me with concerns about her own partner's behavior. "Mr. Darkwater, my business partner has been resisting our accountant's recommendations for better financial oversight. Should I be worried?" I handed her Phoenix Starlight's business card. "Worry is less important than verification. If your partner has nothing to hide, they shouldn't object to transparent processes. And if they do object, then you've learned something important about their priorities." That evening, driving through Chicago's Blackstone district past the office where federal agents had once searched my files, I reflected on how the whistleblower complaint had changed my approach to business partnerships. The investigation hadn't just exposed Viper's crimes, it had taught me that the most dangerous threats often come from people who have legitimate access to your systems and your trust. 3 years later, Shadowmere Enterprises had grown to twice its pre-investigation size, with offices in 3 states and a client base that valued our commitment to transparency and independent oversight. I still kept Agent Nightbane's business card in my desk, not because I expected more fraud investigations, but because I'd learned that federal auditors asking tough questions aren't the enemy of honest businesses. They're the immune system that keeps the financial industry healthy. The whistleblower complaint that was supposed to destroy my company had ended up making it stronger, more transparent, and more successful than Viper had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to an honest business is a thorough investigation that proves exactly how honest it really is.